Hello everyone, welcome back to the Scrap Zone. I'm Julie. Is it too early to talk about Christmas cards? I think not. Come join me today. I'll share with you my Christmas in July card set. When I saw these cute little gnomes, I automatically thought Christmas cards. They come with their own thin cut dies, which made me look in my stash and pull out some of my favorites. In this video, we're going to go over how to customize your Spectrum Noir markers to match your cardstock colors. For this card set, we're using ruby cardstock, and as you can see here, the red blend was really bright. I'll show you how to dull it down to match the cardstock. I went ahead and I pre-cut all of my sentiments. They've all been embossed in gold and in white. Since I didn't really know where I was going with all of the designs, I went ahead and I've cut them at 5.5 to match the full length of my cards. So here I'm just going to go and cut that little bouquet off his hand, and I'm going to show you how to customize the color to match your cardstock. That bright red needed a little bit of brown. So by adding the earth brown tone, the mid-tone as your first layer, I've gone ahead here and I've just laid that down, and I'm going to follow through and pick up my dark red marker. I'm going to use the light and I'm just going to lay it right on top. Now I didn't give it a lot of time to dry because I wanted those two colors to blend together. So the next step here, I'm going to go ahead and add all of my shading. So my shading is all going to come from the right and it's going to go down to the left. So I used the mid-tone to add a little bit of darkness, and as you can see, by adding a brown base, my red now matches my ruby cardstock. So I thought that that was a lot of fun. So we can extend all of the markers that we have currently, and just by tweaking the colors or layering together, you end up with a completely different tone. So I'm just going to go ahead here and color this little guy. And as I mentioned, all of my shading is coming from the right side and it's going down to the left. I'm using the mid-tone of the red, and then I follow through with the light tone and I blend that together. When you lay down your brown, you just make sure to do it in sections so that nothing is drying, and then you lay down the red and it just gives it that perfect tone that you need for the ruby cardstock. So as you can see here, I did speed up the video quite a bit because I want to be able to show you the process for all 7 cards. So I'm just going to finish off my little gnome here, and I'm using here the fair skin marker. I start with the light and then I follow through with the dark. I kind of skip the mid-tone and it just looks really great. Now for his beard here, I didn't want to add too much gray, but I did want to add a shadow. So I started with the blender and then I just went ahead and I added the lightest tone of the gray, and I followed through again with the blender. So that blender tool is actually really nice when you want to mix really light colors. And there you have it. Our little gnome matches our ruby cardstock. I've got 2 themes going on here. I've got the gold and then I've got the white and silver. So we're going to go between both of those to give you options. So don't forget, when you stamp your little gnomes, always use either an intense black ink or an archival ink, because otherwise your alcohol markers are going to bleed through and you're not going to like the results. So we're going to go ahead here and put them together. Every time you see me using a circle, I've used the largest circle from the base and then the largest circle from the stitched circle because they nestle together perfectly, and I really liked how that turned out. I also like to do top folding cards when I take the time to create a base for my cards. So here I'm using a black base. I like to do a top folding card. I just find that it looks really regal, and it doesn't take that much time at all. You just flip the direction and you're good to go. So here I'm showing you again that by cutting all of those strips at the 5.5, I now have the ability to use them horizontally or vertically. All of them have been put down using thin 3D foam tape. I usually start with thin 3D foam tapes when I'm creating cards. It just makes it easier when you mail them out. So this first piece here, I'm just going to lay it at the bottom of the card with thin 3D foam tape, and I'm going to follow through with the pattern paper. So it's pretty easy and simple card to put together. You just have a few pieces and they're all centered on the card. So we're going to add our circles here right on the side, and we're going to follow through and add our little gnome. So since he's the star of the card, I'm going to go ahead and pop him with just regular 3D foam tape. So this one is just the regular thickness. But before I put him down, I'm going to add a little bit of gold thread. So I simply roll that around my fingers, I guess 3 or 4 loops, and then I just tack it directly on the 3D foam tape so that this way it doesn't move, and then when he's down on the card you can kind of fuss with your loops and play around with them until you like how they look. So I'm going to balance off the circle by adding a few gold gems on the opposite side. So I'm going to start with a large gem, and then I'm going to add a small one here at the top, and then a small one here at the bottom to kind of create a triangle formation. And there you have it. Card number 1 is all complete. So we're going to be running through all of the cards pretty quickly because I want to show you all of them. So here is card number 2, and as I mentioned, I went with the silver and white theme for this particular card. And the reason I did that was because I wanted to bring in another medium to this little gnome, and I'm going to add stickles to his little coat. And I just thought that that looked really, really cute, and it matches the snowflake that has been thin cut out of white glitter paper. So by adding that little stickles on his coat, he matches my snowflake perfectly. So we're going to add a little bit of distressing here on all of the pieces, and I'm just using a regular sponge dauber, and I'm just running it through very lightly. When you're using black, less is definitely more. So we're going to fold our top folding card, and we're going to add the front panel at the front. I also like to use liquid glue when I put those down because it gives me the chance to kind of move my pieces and make sure that everything is nice and straight. The other thing that I always do is I always start with the largest of the elements. So in this case here, it's the snowflake. So I make sure that I've got that right at the top where I want it, and then I follow through with all the other pieces. Here you see me wrapping some of the silver thread around the sentiment piece, and I'm going to add the zip strip right at the bottom. So the nice thing about using this buffalo plaid print is that you don't have to measure anything. You can just pop that piece down and you know that it's straight because I just use one of those lines at the bottom. So here you see me adding a little bit of more stickles, and it's only because I didn't give it enough time to dry. So give it enough time to dry and you won't have to touch them up, but that's okay. I just wanted to show you all of these cards. So we're working on card number 3 here, and you can see that the base has been done in ruby, and I'm going to add a little bit of distressing on the card base and on all of the elements just to keep with the theme. And we're going to pop that solid panel right at the front. I really liked how that turned out. This buffalo plaid pattern is perfect for Christmas cards. It was just screaming Christmas cards when I saw the paper collection and this little gnome. So here I'm showing you again that I'm coloring in his little beard, and I'm just adding a shadow. I don't want him to have a gray beard, I just want him to have a shadow. I'm going to pop that circle right at the bottom right against the pattern paper that's in toffee, and the top, the white top of the circle, I'm just going to add a few loops on the back. And again, the reason why I put them on the back, it just makes it a lot easier when you just glue everything down, and then you can kind of manipulate your loops until you are happy on how they look. So I did put a lot of gold thread, and at first I thought it was too much, but it looks really regal, and these are Christmas cards after all. So I did put quite a bit of gold thread. You don't have to go as crazy as I did, but I really liked how they turned out. So I'm going to pop my sentiment here right at the top of the card, and I'm going to line it up. And sometimes, you just move your card around to make sure that everything is nice and straight, and you just continue on with your assembly. So here you see my little gnome, and I purposely put him to the side of the circle to give me room to add a few gems to balance everything out. So they don't have to be centered all the time. Sometimes when you kind of offset them a tiny little bit, it gives you opportunities to add bling, and we all love to add bling, right, to our cards. So this one turned out pretty quick and cute. So here we're on card number 4, and then I've switched it up again, and I've used the New England Ivy cardstock. So I'm going through all of the colors that coordinate with this paper collection. So that's another great thing with the Close to My Heart papers, is that you don't have to think about, does it coordinate, does it match or not, because all of the cardstock are usually part of the color family from the paper collection that you're working with. So here you see me putting my little gnome. I'm going to cut off those little flowers, and I'm going to use my pre-cut sentiment on the vertical side. So it was really good to cut them all at 5.5. That way it gave me the opportunity to use them on the length or on the width of the card. So that's just another little tip for you. We're going to go ahead and put the panel on. And this green dull, the dull green blend, actually matches the cardstock and the colors really, really well. Not sure if it kind of shows up on camera here, but once you have it in front of you, you'll see that I didn't need to change the base marker. It worked really good. So I'm going to add my little gnome, and again I've gone ahead here and I'm adding just a few loops at the back of him, and I'm just going to fluff them out and fuss with them. I think we all fuss with our loops and with our embellishments. And I'm going to cut off that circle. So I don't know if you caught that, but I actually put my circle off the page just as a design element. So it doesn't always have to be right in the center. It can be off the page, and it just creates another element for that card. I'm going to finish off the card with a few gems here and there, and we're going to call this card done. We're going to move on to the next one. So here we're going to be working on card number 5, and as I mentioned before, I've switched over to the white emboss sentiment, and when I do that, I switch to the little coat being done with the stickles, and I also switch to color in my little gnomes, like his shoes and his little belt are done in the brown. So it just gives it a different look. If you're not a fan of gold, you can go with white, or do as I do here and do both. So I kind of like to have a bit of variety when I'm sending Christmas cards, and not always repeating the same process. So this is why I kind of switched it all out. So I'm going to add the stickles here, and I'm going to let that dry. And honestly, I'm not letting it dry long enough, but you get the picture, right? You have to let those dry. I did try and heat emboss them to see if it would kind of make the process go a little faster, and it didn't. So you just have to be patient and set them aside. Probably a good idea to start with the stickles if you know that's what you're going to do, and then let them dry, preferably overnight, but if you don't have time, just start a good hour before. So this little card is pretty much done. We're going to add a few of the silver gems, and again I'm doing that triangle formation, and I'm going opposite of all of the twine that I've put on the other side. So here we're on card number 6, and if you like horizontal cards, I've got a few of those in this design as well. So I'm just kind of positioning all of the elements. I'm going to go ahead and do the ink distressing on all of the edges as I've done for all of them. I'm going to wrap that little gold thread on my sentiment, and I'm going to trim it down to make sure that it fits this design. Here I'm going to pop down that nice white glitter snowflake, and then it gives me enough room to kind of position this bottom piece, and I'm just going to add it down with liquid glue. Again, the liquid glue is my preference when I do cards, only because I can manipulate the piece and make sure it's nice and straight. So for this card here, the first little gnome was put down with thin 3D foam tape, and then this second one here, I just used the regular. So you can see that there's a little bit of dimension here, and it gives me just enough room to sneak my sentiment directly in back of him, and it just looks like that piece goes clearly across. So I kind of like that, and we're going to fuss with, again, the thread and put a couple of gems, and this card is done. So if you're still with me, we're putting together card number 7, and I know it's a little bit of a process, but you know, sometimes you kind of have to see what's going on, so I thought that I would show you them all. Here I'm going to go ahead and do the same thing I did with card number 4. I'm going to sneak that circle down so that it kind of goes below the card, and I'm going to trim it down just to give it a different element. And when I'm using the white here, I thought, okay, well, let's put him with a little white coat. So you've got a variety. You can do them whichever way you would like, but I just thought that, you know, introducing different looks for them, and it just makes it fun. I just kind of enjoy putting these cards together. I'm going to add my little circle here right at the bottom of the page, and as you can see, it's falling off of the page, so I really like that element. I'm going to add my sentiment with 3D foam tape like every other ones in this collection, and we're pretty much done here. So I want to thank you so much for hanging out with me today, and I hope that you've learned a few helpful tips on how to create this beautiful workshop. Now, if you're new to my channel, please subscribe and don't forget to click that little gray bell to receive notifications for my future projects. If you'd like to see more card creations, click this link right here. Thank you so much and have a wonderful day.